Hi, everyone. You are listening to Radio Cherry Bomb, and I'm your host, Kerry Diamond. This is the third episode of our special Power Miniseries, and today's guest certainly knows how to use her power. It's Victoria James, the trailblazing sommelier, author, and advocate for working moms. Where do we even begin with Victoria? She overcame a complicated upbringing to become one of the youngest sommeliers in the country, a journey she wrote about in her memoir, Wine Girl: The Obstacles, Humiliations, and Triumphs of America's Youngest Sommelier. In 2020, she helped expose the sexual harassment happening at the highest level of the wine industry and was featured in a New York Times investigative story on that subject by reporter Julia Moskin. Victoria has risen through the ranks of Gracious Hospitality, parent company of the celebrated COTE restaurants, and today she is their executive director of Beverage and Partnerships. Victoria is the mother of two. Her little one is only 3 months old, and through her Instagram account, she has helped normalize seeing pregnant women and nursing moms working in restaurants, beverage, and hospitality. People should get used to seeing us pump in all the places we weren't able to years ago, she wrote in a post last month. Mamas, all the spaces are yours. Last week, Cherry Bomb hosted our first ever Power Awards, and Victoria received the Trailblazer Award, given by Cherry Bomb and the legendary champagne house, Veuve Clicquot. Victoria is such an important person in our industry, and I can't wait for you to learn more about her. Stay tuned for our chat. Speaking of Veuve, our Power Miniseries is presented by Veuve Clicquot, the iconic champagne house led to greatness by one of the most powerful women in the history of champagne, Madame Clicquot. Bold, brilliant, and ahead of her time, Madame Clicquot took over her late husband's champagne house at just 27 years old. In an era when women couldn't have bank accounts or run businesses, she defied expectations and led with vision and determination. Madame Clicquot established many firsts in the world of champagne: the first vintage champagne, the first riddling table, and the first blended rosé champagne. She took the world of champagne into the future and never looked back. Today, Veuve Clicquot honors her with the Maison's newest vintage cuvée, La Grande Dame 2018, a champagne that embodies everything Madame Clicquot stood for: vision, drive, and audacity. This 25th vintage is made with 90% Pinot Noir, her favorite grape, and delivers a balance, finesse, and brightness that echoes the sun-kissed harvest from which it came, staying true to the house's motto: only one quality, the finest. Elegant and precise, La Grande Dame 2018 has delicate notes of citrus and floral, and a salinity that speaks to its deep roots and craftsmanship. As we raise a glass to powerful women everywhere, let's remember the original Grande Dame who poured her boldness into every bottle and changed the world of champagne forever. Learn more about La Grande Dame 2018 at veuveclicquot.com. Now, let's check in with today's guest. Victoria James, welcome back to Radio Cherry Bomb.
Thank you for having me back.
So thrilled. And so nice to see you again. I got to see you last night, and now I get to see you, not even 24 hours later.
We need more of this.
We do need more of this. You just had a baby.
Baby Margot.
Baby Margot, 12 weeks old.
12 weeks.
Wow.
Fresh.
Did you take much of a maternity leave?
I have a very robust maternity leave, but being a restaurateur, you're never, you're always in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
It's my other baby, so it's hard.
Yeah. And you have an expanded title now, which we'll talk about. So you've got even more responsibility since we spoke to you last time. But let's talk about your award. We were so proud to give you our first ever Trailblazer Award last night in conjunction with our friends at Veuve Clicquot. And I was curious, what does being a trailblazer mean to you? Like when you hear that someone's a trailblazer, what comes to mind?
Blazing trails and always.
That's a good one.
No, it was such an honor to receive. Thank you. When I was a young sommelier growing up in this world of wine 15 years ago, it's crazy to think that 15 years ago I was 21, the youngest sommelier in the country. Certainly not the case anymore. I always was very scared to enter rooms, right? I was this young chick. I didn't look like a lot of people in the wine world. You kind of have this fear, but you swallow it anyway and you go forward. And so to me, I think that's what a trailblazer is. It's being scared, but doing it anyway. And hopefully so that other people don't have to be scared in the future.
I know we talked about you when we gave the award out last night, when I introduced you. I feel like we barely scratched the surface on how much of a trailblazer you are. Knowing you to the extent that I do, I know you don't walk around and think about yourself that way. But really, when you stop and think about it, the things you've done, the firsts you've done, the work you've done on behalf of women in this industry is really, really remarkable. It's been 15 years since you became a sommelier. It has been a very busy 15 years.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've stopped to, pat yourself on the back at all, but I hope you have.
That's sweet. I mean, it's been so busy. Last month, I had lunch with one of our restaurant partners and Simon at Le Bernardin. Amazing. Super lucky. And Chef Eric's amazing. And the sommelier at the end, she pulled me aside and just said, thank you for all the work you've done for us in our industry. And probably because I was 6 weeks postpartum, I just started crying, and I cried on the taxi ride home. And I guess you don't sometimes stop to think about it, but it means a lot that all the work is doing something for others.
Absolutely. We should mention Simon because I know he's going to come up a lot in this conversation. Simon Kim, who is your partner, your business partner. He's the founder of Gracious Hospitality, which is the parent company of all the restaurants you work with. You're nodding. Am I getting that correct?
Correct, yes.
I met him for the first time at the San Pellegrino
That was the first
brunch
time.
with Stanley Tucci.
Yeah.
That was a very fun brunch. It was so nice to meet Simon, and he seems really lovely, and gracious seems to be the right word to name his hospitality company.
Yeah, he's good energy. He's amazing. And, when I met him 10 years ago and he had this dream concept of COTE, someone asked him, what will you name your hospitality company? Because it doesn't matter at first, right? But once you start to become more well-known, people think of your hospitality group. And he said, I'm going to call it Gracious Hospitality. And they said, it's not really catchy. What about something else? He goes, no, Gracious. And he stuck to it, because he really believes hospitality should be gracious. And it's so funny, a few years ago, I saw this person again, and she was introducing Simon and me to a table of guests. And she goes, and Gracious Hospitality, isn't it an amazing name? I was like, yeah, it always was. And Simon is the embodiment of graciousness. And he's a really good person and a great boss.
What is his background? Was he a chef, a restaurateur?
Simon Kim, he started bussing tables at his mom's restaurant in Tribeca and, went to hospitality school actually in Vegas. So it's a return. And he had some kitchen stints, but always been a front of house guy, restaurateur. And I think chef-driven concepts are amazing, but one of the things that makes Gracious so different is it really is Simon's brain, and he is front of house driven. So just like when you go to a Danny Meyer restaurant, you get Danny Meyer's brain. When you come to Gracious restaurants, you get Simon's front of house brain, which is pretty cool. And it's always hospitality driven.
Well, he seems like he's been a great partner to you, and he's been a big supporter of your projects, of which you've had many.
Yes, I mean, I definitely have been a thorn in his side many a times. I'm very grateful to him that he lets me do a lot of crazy things. And sometimes I'll bring up a side project or an idea to him, and you can just tell that it's, but he is so supportive and he's so good and he always has everyone's best interest in mind. And so I think as long as it's best for the restaurants, everybody wins.
Tell us about the restaurants, since we're on the subject. Walk us through the world of Gracious Hospitality.
So Gracious Hospitality was founded about 10 years ago by Simon Kim. He's the CEO founder. We opened COTE Korean Steakhouse in New York City in 2017, our flagship. The partners then were myself, Simon, Chef David Shim, and Wesley Son, our director of hospitality. So
you were a partner right out of the gate.
Yes.
Impressive.
Yes, all three of us. And so just me and the boys. And I was like their, kid sister that served them wine. And I was in charge of all the liquid. We were super fortunate. We got a Michelin star right away and a lot of early support. We opened up in 2021, COTE in Miami, also got a lot of, support there and a Michelin star. And then last year we opened up COTE in Singapore and also COQODAQ, our Korean fried chicken concept with the largest champagne list in America. And later this year, we're opening up COTE in the Venetian in Vegas. And next year, we're doing a behemoth of a project at the 550 Madison space, the old Sony building, which will be 4 concepts in one skyscraper.
We'll be right back with today's guest. The new issue of Cherry Bomb's print magazine is out now, and it's our first ever Power issue. Inside, you'll find our Power list of 100 women doing amazing things in the food world, plus recipes from folks like Meredith Hayden and Haley Catalano, and features on Gloria Steinem, Chef Mashama Bailey, culinary creative Sophia Rowe, and others. We proudly print our magazine at the family-owned Meridian Printing in Rhode Island. If you've never seen our magazine before, it's bold, beautiful, and thick, and is printed on gorgeous paper. You can subscribe at cherrybomb.com or pick up an issue at your favorite bookstore or culinary shop. Places like Soho News in Manhattan, Lucy's Snack Bar in Corpus Christi, Texas, and Omnivore Books on Food in San Francisco. Visit cherrybomb.com for the full list of stockists. What makes you unique as a som? You address this in the book and you've addressed this in different interviews, but sometimes people might look at soms the way they look at doctors. It's like you kind of want the doctor to be maybe a little older than you, to maybe have gone through some things themselves so they understand, what phase of life you're going through.
For sure. And, I think Simon saw in me a lot of himself. We were both underdogs, right? He comes from a Korean American background. I was a young woman and he was super young as well. We both kind of were never taken seriously, but we wanted to be. And so when I was growing up kind of in this industry and a 21-year-old sommelier, yeah, luckily it's not as high stakes as being a doctor. You're just serving wine. But I was able to bring a different perspective. And so not when I was 21, but, a little bit later when I was pregnant with my first daughter, Simone, I remember working the floor as a sommelier during the pandemic, 8-9 months pregnant, knocking over wine glasses with my big belly. And I was so self-conscious of what all the men would say when I would walk over to tables. They'd have these client meetings and this big, huge pregnant woman comes over trying to serve them wine. So self-conscious. And then this one day I was serving this table and this woman at the table gave me kind of a weird look. At the end of the meal, she pulled me aside and said, "Thank you so much. It's so amazing seeing you working, doing what you love, being pregnant. It's so empowering." And it's so funny. The whole time I was so worried about what the men would think, I didn't stop to think what the women would think and what it would mean to them. And that's, I think, the perspective I offer that's different. And I have been very fortunate as a young female sommelier to be able to connect with a lot of young women and a lot of people who love and admire, women and their perspective. So it's a double-edged sword, but I think it's served me well.
You have done a lot to try to normalize being pregnant and working in food, drink, hospitality. Is that something you set out to do, or is that something that just happened along the way?
Yeah, someone asked me that the other day because I've been posting all these photos on Instagram and videos.
If you're not following Victoria on Instagram and you are a woman in this industry, you really, really should.
These photos of me pumping
In a bikini.
in a bikini, in the wine cellar, at Michelin-starred restaurants, in the boardroom, at Cherry Bomb Jubilee, at galas. Well, first, I just did it because, I don't know, you're alone usually in a room for 20 to 30 minutes, and what else are you going to do? But in a way, being a woman in this industry and postpartum, especially when you're pumping, you're isolated. It's extremely isolating. You have to leave sometimes these rooms to go into another room by yourself. And in that kind of quiet, you want connection. And I knew that if I was feeling that way, I'm sure so many other mothers were too. And so I started kind of just sharing these funny things. And I think it really resonated with a lot of women because they felt the same. And I think it's important that we see women pumping all the time. And all of the male partners at work have gotten used to me. And one of the other partners too, Amy Zoe, who's amazing, who's also, postpartum and pumping. We're in these meetings and we're just pumping during it. And I think it's great to normalize it because it's just a normal thing. And we're just feeding babies out here.
Mm-hmm. You brought up nursing, but really you've done two things. You posted a lot of you pregnant also. And I think I have seen people have weird reactions to servers who are pregnant, to restaurant employees who are pregnant. You know this, I used to own restaurants. And back when I had my places, and we had a pregnant server, people were very uncomfortable with that, even though the server wanted to keep working. I think that's the first thing you've done. Like you've really tried to normalize the experience of being pregnant and being in these jobs. It's one thing to be a server. It's another thing to be a pregnant som because people don't understand how can you be a sommelier and be working in wine and be pregnant and be tasting and doing all the things you're supposed to do. Do you mind explaining how you do your job when you're pregnant? Because I think it'll enlighten a lot of folks.
For sure. Yeah. Our head sommelier at COQODAQ, Erica, is amazing. And she had a similar experience because she was pregnant as a sommelier before she started with us. And she gave me a call. We had just had mutual connections in the industry. And she was like, "How do I do it?" people are so uncomfortable. And, I told her that story of the woman coming up to me and thanking me. And I think that times are changing, luckily. But being a sommelier, you just smell the wine, you taste it, you can spit it out. You just have to own it. And I told her there's a power in being pregnant. You're carrying human life. It's pretty badass. And so I think that I just tried to channel mostly going tableside, like putting my big belly forward, hands on my hips, going right up to these tables and saying, what are you going to drink? Because you have this big mama energy. Like, how was someone going to say no to you? So in fact, actually, it really was super useful in sales when you can use it as a tool and when you can own the power. But I get that it can be hard for a lot of women. And I think the biggest thing we can do is just normalize it.
Do you think it helped that you had a reputation to stand on at that point?
For sure. I think that's also why it's so important that if you do have a platform and you have gotten to this level, to try and use it to do those sorts of things. Because when I was talking last night about the whole, New York Times thing and all the sommeliers, I couldn't have done that 15 years ago. No one would have taken me seriously, and they would have said, oh, she's just complaining about abuse or harassment, but she's not even a very good sommelier. I've never even heard of her. Who is she, sort of thing. And so it helps that, a decade later you have all these accolades under your belt. And so people are like, oh, well, now I'm paying attention. So, if you have that power wherever you are, you need to kind of use it.
You're right. Like, you shouldn't have to have this amazing reputation to be able to do your job and be pregnant at the same time. It should just be.
It should just be.
Yeah.
It should just be.
And then you brought up the nursing part. It is amazing what you have been doing for nursing moms. I mean, restaurants are not easy places to really just be a human sometimes, let alone a nursing mother. I mean, there aren't places to change. There are very few offices. There's just not a lot of extra space off the floor.
Yeah.
Generally.
And also, just unless you've breastfed, you might not know that it is exhausting. I mean, I think it's like you burn 20 calories per ounce. So you're just constantly burning like 500 to 800 extra calories a day. You're constantly dehydrated. You're worn down. You're physically producing food for another human being. It's already exhausting. And then you have to carry around a bunch of things. It's not fun, It's not enjoyable. I mean, nursing can be with the babies on you, but pumping's like a machine sucking on your nipples. What's fun about that? It's just exhausting. So why are we making it more hard? Just give us mamas a break, please.
Exactly. I love what you wrote on your last post about mamas take up all the space that you need to.
Yeah, all the spaces should be for moms, I mean, come on. You have to love your moms. They're the best.
Mom's the bomb, as we like to say. Another thing I'd like to talk about in an area where you have certainly been a trailblazer is fighting sexual harassment in this industry. Folks might be familiar with the article that Julia Moskin wrote that you participated in that brought down a lot of folks at the Court of Master Sommeliers because a lot of sexual harassment was going on. But there was actually a bigger project sort of behind the scenes. Can you explain to people how that article came about?
Sure. So in March 2020, my book Wine Girl came out, and it kind of detailed a lot of abuse and harassment I had gone through. And maybe because it was the pandemic, a lot of people were reading, especially hospitality workers that were maybe out of jobs. And I started getting hundreds of messages from women all around the world detailing, oh my gosh, I went through something similar too. Here's my story of harassment, abuse, misogyny, rape, like terrible stories. And there started to be like a through line. And there were a lot of names, people that kind of kept coming up. And so I started collecting these stories with two other amazing female sommeliers, Jane and Liz, who are also in the articles. And we just started this document, and I remember it's still called Operation Girl Power. I don't even know how I came up with that name. And then we started talking. Then this woman said, hey, call this woman. And then this woman said, call this woman and this woman. And this whisper network started. And we realized that there was crazy, institutionalized abuse, harassment, all of these crazy things happening within the Court of Master Sommeliers. I mean, happening all over the wine world, for sure. But specifically, it was just really part of this process. Like, you kind of had to like sleep to get to the top, to get a Master Sommelier pin or what have you. So we took all these stories and all of these interviews that we did over the course of 6 months and then handed it to Julia at the Times. I was kind of like, Julia, I don't know if you can do anything with this. Obviously, you're amazing. You did the whole Mario Batali story and the spotted pig. I don't know if this is something. What do you think? And she was like, what?
Because it was so many years after Me Too.
So many. And it was just what we had collected. There were so many women. And last night at the awards, when I was talking to Julia, she was like, I thought the food world was bad. These men in wine were so entitled and like they're so just gross. It was just another level. It was this secret society, this old boys club that no one really knew about. And all of this abuse was just rampant. It was horrible. So the article came out, and I remember the day I was pre-opening at our COTE Miami. I was in the middle of these interviews, and I just broke down. I mean, right before the article came out, Julia called me and she said, hey, I want to give you a heads up, a warning about something in the article that, might upset you. I was like, oh gosh, what could it be? I've already told the world everything. And she said one of the women, she also went through something similar. And she thought she had to do this thing with this guy because he had told her this is what Victoria James had done. And she said, well, I guess this is how you become the next Victoria James. And I'm sorry, I'm crying now. I just broke down. I was like, I cannot believe that these like terrible men had also used my name to try and learn other women. And there was, I didn't do anything to help. And it was just so awful. And I'm so glad that those men are now, the whole court of master sommeliers, the board had to resign. And all of these, not all of them, there's still some out there, but in general, most of them had to resign and were forced to lose their titles. And the culture has changed. And I mentioned this last night, but, a year later, a reporter called me and asked me, did it work? Have you dismantled misogyny in the wine world? Is it over? And she was kind of missing the point, right? Because I think that, first of all, the impetus is never on us as the women and sharing our stories, but it's not about what we took down and what we dismantled. It's about what we built and this beautiful sisterhood. And I think that the more we come together as women, the more we share our stories and are there for one another, it's so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have to worry about breaking down things. We're just always building.
You said something, though, Victoria. You said you felt like you hadn't helped, but you had written Wine Girl at that point. You revealed so much in that book about what you had been through. And when I read that book, even before the Julia story came out, I just thought it was remarkable because you had broken open a lot that was going on in this industry that people might not have even realized. So I do think you helped with that book and maybe didn't even realize how much you were helping.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, when I was early on in my career, I saw a lot of abuse,
Mm-hmm.
not just with me. And I didn't think I could say anything. I didn't think anyone would care. I knew it was wrong. I always kind of felt this guilt, like I needed to share my story to help others too, because I knew that it was all around me.
Times have changed, and I think more people feel empowered to speak out.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a time when if you weren't at a certain level in your career, that you kind of had to stay quiet because no one would listen to you.
Yeah. I mean, even last night, one woman came up to me and she went to the CIA years and years ago. And she said, it brought back these memories. She's like, there was one woman per class in the CIA. And she said, I remember whenever you had to go to like the walk-in freezer, like you just had to bring a knife with you. It was just part of the culture. It's so crazy to think, but.
Right, that you're paying to go to culinary school and you need to bring a knife with you into the walk-in.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think times have changed, but we just need to keep sharing our stories.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because our overall topic today is power.
Mm.
This is part of our Power Miniseries. And I think this is what using your power means. All these things, that we're talking about. Speaking of the word power, you started an organization called Wine Empowered.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that.
So Wine Empowered's a 501c3 nonprofit. And so we offer tuition-free wine education to women and people of color in the hospitality industry. And so what the goal is here is we diversify the whole hospitality industry by, empowering these people with this education. And it started back in 2018 is when we officially incorporated, long before these conversations were a thing, because we were offering these kind of free wine classes at COTE. And the other two female sommelier founders and me, we realized that, we thought a little bit of education, a free wine class would lead to better sales at the restaurant, would lead to better morale, etc. It did. But what was most impressive was that people walked away from these classes feeling empowered. And they took this education and they went from bussers, dishwashers, to servers, to sommeliers, to managers. And we realized, wow, this is the key to making the whole hospitality and wine world more equitable and getting more people at the top and making it more dynamic from different walks of life. So Wine Empowered was born. We're still very small but mighty, but please, support. You can go on our website, wine-empowered.com.
Yeah, tell people the different ways they can participate or support.
The biggest thing is, following us on Instagram at Wine Empowered, staying attuned with when we're doing our annual classes. We always need recommendations for great candidates who would be perfect for the program. We want to give this education to people who really, really take hold of it and do amazing things in our industry. And of course, you can always support. Donations are always welcome.
And you've had a real financial impact on people's lives. You talked about someone who took the classes who was a dishwasher at the restaurant making about $50,000 a year. And today they're a manager making $150,000. That's a big jump.
Yeah, I mean, the program is essentially, helps people build their careers. It's a career training program. The tuition-free wine classes, it's a skill you can learn that's niche and can really, really help advance your career. It has had great impact. We've seen people start as servers, for example, or bartenders, and now run programs for entire restaurant groups. So it really does have quite the impact.
That's great. You were the country's youngest sommelier at one point. Was there any kind of program like this when you were coming up in the industry?
No, definitely not. Everything you had to pay so much money for. I remember taking out loans, working extra, anything to try and make money and pay for these very expensive wine courses that you pay so much money for, and then you get in the room and they don't even respect you. You're like, okay, come on. So that's also the thing about Wine Empowered. Obviously, it's tuition free, but it's also like a safe space where people can really learn and grow.
Mm-hmm. People really need to read your book. I mean, when you talk about all this, you're not someone who came from money or privilege or any of those things. I mean, talk about trailblazing. You really had to figure out the education part for yourself, take all those steps without mentors.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's interesting. I definitely grew up with not a lot of money, which is how you end up working at a greasy spoon diner when you're 13 under the railroad tracks in New Jersey. But, it's an interesting dichotomy because, my dad's mom was a cotton picker in Tennessee, and she was, very of the earth, right? And then my mom's mom was a countess from Italy, and so she was very blue blood. So in the book, I say it's like this blue blood meets blue collar. And so although I didn't have a lot of money, I always, as every young girl does, and you read princess books and things and you think you're so special. I remember reading The Little Princess when I was young and just thinking I was like this Stephen Crane character, this flower in a mud puddle. And, maybe it's these high ambitions I had, like Simon does as well. But I always believed, and I'm not quite sure why, but that there was something better and I could build it for myself, which now that I have two young daughters, if you rewatch a lot of these princess movies, you realize how actually badass the princesses are. Like the other day I watched Thumbelina with my daughter. And first of all, the dude is totally boring. He gets frozen in an ice cube. But the entire time Thumbelina is a badass and crushing it. I'm like, wow, all these princesses are so fucking cool.
Wait, I thought you were going to say the opposite, that they're not very empowering.
If you look back, there's definitely some problematic things for sure. Snow White's just laying there, some dude kisses her and wakes her up. Not great. But some are pretty badass, and really make it for themselves. And the dude is just usually a dud. So I think we need to bring back more of that storytelling.
I would like to see some of those princess stories rewritten. Absolutely.
For sure.
How did the idea of writing a memoir come about?
So this is actually a good story. I always kept journals. Writing for me is really therapeutic. It's a way I kind of make sense of things. I think it was David Sedaris that once said, I don't know what I'd do if I don't have writing. I'd be a mess. And I feel the same. Around the time I met Simon in 2015, I also met this literary agent. And I had been writing stories for New York Magazine and just things here and there on wine. And she said, do you have anything else? And I said, well, I'm kind of writing on this, this book about being a young sommelier as a female, all these things I faced. She's like, listen, no one's going to buy that. Why don't you instead write a book on rosé? The rosé craze is huge. I go, okay, yeah, sure. That's a good idea. So I actually did that.
Oh, right. I forgot. That's your first book. Yeah.
Drink Pink. It was actually a great idea because it was during the rosé craze. And I kind of, told people to take rosé seriously, et cetera. It gave me a good introduction to the publishing world, which, as you know, is complicated. Then Me Too hit. And that story that Julia wrote about the spotted pig came out, and my agent called me. This is not Andy.
I was going to ask.
Andy McNichol's amazing.
We have a friend in common who's a brilliant literary agent.
And my current agent. And she said, "Do you still have that book?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Okay, I think now people will buy it." I wrote, the manuscript over the course of like 6 months, a year, pieced together all these journal things, all these like writings I had, and kind of made it into a manuscript with her help. And we were ready to send it out to publishers. I remember it was a Friday. She said, "Well, is there anyone that you have a connection to in the publishing world that maybe we should like specially send it out to?" And I said, "Well, there's this one guy who comes in the restaurant sometimes, and he's really nice. And sometimes I email him wine recommendations, and he's super sweet. I don't know if you know him. His name is Daniel Halpern." And she's like, "Okay, well, we'll send it to Daniel Halpern, but he's a legend in the publishing world, and it's Anthony Bourdain's editor, Padma Lakshmi, Patti Smith. The list goes on. Joyce Carol Oates." She said, "We'll send it to him. Don't hold your breath. Usually it takes a few months." So it's a Friday. Monday morning, she calls me and she says, "Daniel Halpern wants to preempt the book and take it off the market. He doesn't want to go to auction."
I just got goosebumps.
I mean, I was beyond. I couldn't even speak. And, it was sort of meant to be. And it was such a testament to, I think, hospitality workers, because I had met him through the restaurant and we had just built a relationship based off that. And I don't think I would have trusted anyone else with my story but him. And he's just the absolute best. And he was so gentle and sturdy throughout the whole process.
Sounds a little bit like Stephanie Danler's story with Sweet Bitter, for those of you who've read that.
Right. Didn't she meet someone at Buvette when she was working there? Or?
I can't remember whether it was Buvette or one of Danny Meyer's places, but she, I think, met her future editor through the restaurant.
Yeah. I mean, oftentimes when we have people that we're hiring or, bringing onto the team, I always say, like, think about it. What's in it for you? I mean, you never know who's sitting in front of you. And, I think that if you always are putting yourself forward, everybody wins. And I think that some of our, even servers and people at the restaurant have seen some amazing success with people that they've just served.
So putting all of that out into the world, everything that was in Wine Girl, how did that change things for you personally?
Yeah. It's one of those things like just like vomit. You just had to get out. And you definitely feel better afterwards for sure. I didn't expect it to have the impact it did. I thought it might be therapeutic. I thought it could help and resonate with some people. That's why I wrote it. But I didn't expect it would have such a huge impact on the wine world. And I think that's been the most rewarding thing.
You love writing. You are launching a Substack soon. Tell us about it.
I love Substack. I've been kind of following along some favorites for quite some time. I know everyone has a Substack these days, but there kind of was a gap to me. I wanted to read about restaurants and wine as a restaurateur, as sommelier would. I kind of want to introduce the conversation more the way we talk about restaurants and food and people and wine. And so we're launching that later this month, and I'm very excited.
What's it called?
It's easy. Wine, Restaurants, People. And it's just going to be about wine, restaurants, and people. And, kind of behind the scenes, I think everyone's always curious about what goes on behind the scenes in restaurants, in the wine world. What do sommeliers actually drink and think about these bottles of wine they serve? And how does one go about ordering millions of dollars of beverage a year for a restaurant group? All of these cool things. And I could talk to a journalist, I guess, but wouldn't it be just better if I just wrote it myself? So here we are.
How often do you expect to publish your Substack?
Weekly.
Putting the pressure on you right now.
Weekly.
Victoria.
Weekly. And, I think the people that really pay to subscribe will get some pretty cool things. Lots of cool insider info and tips, and lots of great wine recommendations and pairings and recipes and travel lists and, really behind the curtain.
Okay, everybody, stay tuned for that. We also haven't really talked about the kids. Now you've got 2 kids. Simone is so adorable. She really is one of the cutest kids I've ever seen.
The best.
She has more style than most grown-ups.
She's the best. Simone is, I don't even know how to describe it. Kids just give you so much focus and joy. And one of the best things about Simone coming to this world, besides her amazing light, is now whenever I look at somebody, I'm like, oh, this is somebody's daughter. This is somebody's son, and I love her so, so much. And just seeing someone be like, oh, Kerry, you're someone's daughter. Ah, I love you so much because I know someone loves you so much, and it helps too, especially in restaurants when you're dealing with a general population. Let me just say, it's really hard to love people sometimes. And so it gives you perspective where you're like, oh, okay, focus. This is somebody's daughter. Okay, I'm going to be nice. So it helps. It's a magical thing.
There's a little bit more conversation now about postpartum. I know postpartum depression is something that has been written about and talked about for a long time, but I think there's a new level of conversation that's taking place. I don't know if you read Sarah Hoover's book, Motherload, about postpartum. Sophia Rose talking about postpartum care. Caroline Chambers, who's got a great Substack, What to Cook When You Don't Feel Like Cooking. She spoke at Jubilee, and she said one of the things she would really love to see more of for moms is a bigger focus on postpartum care. How are you doing?
Thank you. No, I mean, it's nice just to ask somebody, like, how are you doing? And I think to talk about it more as well. It's so hard. It's so hard, even if you have amazing support. This time with Margot, I have my partner who's amazing. I have my sister who lives nearby who's amazing. My brother-in-law, my partner's entire family, his in-laws moved half a block away. All these amazing people. And it's still so hard. Your body just gets wrecked. And your hormones are crazy. And just weird things that happen, like, this is so funny as a sommelier as well. I had pregnancy gingivitis. When I would brush my teeth, my gums would bleed. Isn't that insane and also disgusting? But then 2 weeks after I gave birth, it stopped. Crazy things happen to your body that you never would imagine, right? And so it's just difficult. So I think that support, talking about it, is just so helpful.
And you've been really good about bringing Simone to things.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, Simone comes to everything because, I think it's so important. And actually, Claire Reichenbach, who runs the James Beard Foundation, she brings her daughter, Sasha, everywhere.
Yeah, Sasha's super cute.
Super cute. And I asked her about it one day, and she's just like, sometimes childcare falls through, et cetera. That happens with me as well. But I think it's so important for your daughter to see that your mom works. I was talking to Rita Jamais about this when I interviewed her for Cherry Bomb. And
longtime restaurateur and champagne maker.
Maker and queen. And she used to have, one of the Les Six, the 6 best restaurants in New York, La Caravelle, along with Lutèce and La Côte Basque. How did she do it? She had essentially triplets, one son and then twins, back to back. And she was like, listen, your kids just need to see you work. And they're all amazing now. They're all incredible. Nick has Sweet Green. Christophe and Patrick also are wildly successful and great humans and great, family people. So I think it's just important for your kids to see that work is part of your life. That you're not doing it, of course, to provide for the family, but also because it's a part of your identity and who you are. And it's important for you to prioritize that as well as parenting.
Rita's been a great mentor to you.
She's the absolute best. And she is truly the fairy godmother to so many in this industry, especially women. And she was, at the beginning of my career, so helpful. And again, it was so isolating and hard for me. And she's always been so supportive. And I remember I gave her an early copy of Wine Girl. And I just wanted to see what she would think. Was it too much? And she was so supportive and so sweet. So she's the best.
Let's talk about this summer. You have some fun things going on this summer. You all are going to be at the U.S. Open.
So last year, COQODAQ, we had an amazing run at the U.S. Open. We had a stall there where we served amazing chicken nuggets topped with caviar, Petrosian caviar, which is actually a deal because you're getting a tin of caviar for $100. I know everyone was like, oh my gosh, the most expensive chicken nugget. It is a deal for caviar, actually. But we'll be back with those beautiful orange boxes, and COQODAQ is taking over the U.S. Open again in an amazing way. So if you're at the U.S. Open this year, look for our COQODAQ pop-up.
The U.S. Open has really stepped it up food and drink-wise.
Yeah, they're crushing it. It's amazing. And I've always loved the energy and vibe of the U.S. Open. So I'm glad that we now have amazing representation in food and beverage.
Are you a tennis fan?
Recently, I used to just go to the U.S. Open because I just loved, there's something really intimate about the stadium. I mean, it's so wild. It's dead quiet. and everyone takes it so seriously. And I've gotten into it more. My partner always jokes that I'm into sports in a very posh way. I like to go and someone nice maybe will take me, and I don't really understand what's happening, but I love the energy and vibe.
You sound like me. My first trip to the U.S. Open was for what turned out to be Serena Williams' last game.
Wow.
Kerry Gold had extra tickets, and they said, would you like to use them? And I was like, absolutely.
Yeah. It's so inspiring what these athletes do and what they put themselves through. So I might not know what's even going. I don't even know the rules so half the time, but I'm just like, this is so inspirational.
Mm-hmm. Hugely so. And then the Venetian. So back and forth to Vegas a lot?
Just starting these trips. Last year was my first year in Vegas ever. And I was like, whoa, this city is intense.
You know I'm a big Vegas fan.
Well, so you told me that, and I didn't get it at first because I'm not, I like the boutique hotels and like the Nona making you pasta.
Mm-hmm.
So Vegas was never really my thing. But this last trip I took a couple weeks ago, I was like, I get what Kerry's talking about. Because here's the thing that's amazing about Vegas. As a hospitality worker, 1 in 4 people, their job is in hospitality. It is truly the best hospitality city in America. And when I was doing all these interviews with candidates, people would come with so much pride and dignity because you're able to make huge 6-figure salaries as a server, as a busser, as a runner, have an amazing house, send your kids to great schools. The quality of life, the dignity and pride in the hospitality workers, even if it's not your city, it's definitely your people. So I love Vegas. So we're opening up COTE in the Venetian in Las Vegas later this year. So hopefully that will be packed all the time.
The Venetian has a lot of fun food and beverage stuff that they're working on. Mm-hmm.
They just opened up their food court.
Oh, did it open?
Yes.
I saw it when I was there. I saw all the sort of posters for it.
Oh, amazing. Death and Company has something there. Scar's Pizza, which I love, which is great.
Ivan Ramen, right?
Ivan Ramen, Turkey and the Wolf, that amazing focaccia sandwich place I can never pronounce, Alantico Venayo, I think.
Did you get to see Dita Von Teese while you were there?
No, but I love her.
I don't know if her yeah, I love her. She came on the podcast, and she was a great interview.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know if she's still in residence there, but if she is, definitely go see her.
I really want to too because I watched Gia's film, The Last Showgirl, and I know Gia was also on the show, and I love her.
Gia Coppola. Mm-hmm.
She also has an amazing Vegas list.
I'm sure.
And, after watching her movie, I was like, wow, the showgirl culture and the kind of last renaissance of that she captured so well. And next time I do have to see Dita because she's definitely bringing it back in a big way.
That was a beautiful movie. What should people be drinking this summer? Or what are people drinking with the chicken and the caviar?
Yes, champagne. So everyone come to COQODAQ.
That was a leading question. I know you love champagne.
Everyone come to COQODAQ and drink champagne. It's just the best excuse to drink champagne. And also, you have no excuse not to drink champagne. First of all, it's the most amazing pairing with fried chicken and caviar. We have 100 under 100 selection. So literally, you can get amazing selections for under $100 champagne. And we have the largest champagne list in America. So,
no, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. We go big. So I wanted to make this program where it was like, you can't say no. And we have affordable. We literally have everything. It's like you walk into a library, like an Enotech. Crazy things. If you're a wild collector, if you're like a weirdo like me, there's something for everybody. So you need to drink champagne at COQODAQ this
Are
summer.
you still on the floor?
I try to be, not as much anymore, with 2 kids and 4 restaurants, it's hard.
And you have a new title, right? You've added partnerships to your title?
I've taken on some partnerships too, which is great. And it just naturally came about because, wine is so fun. And so I think people are naturally attracted to my beverage side of the company because it's liquid. And we've just done so many fun things together. So, it's been such a joy to work and bring in so many new fun partners from fashion and beauty and, in the literary world and media and continue. So if you want to do a fun partnership with our restaurants, let me know.
It's a whole new world.
Whole new world.
All right, we'll ask you one last question because we've almost run out of time. If you could have a dream person come to the restaurant and set them up with chicken, caviar, champagne, who would you love to serve?
Well, I served my dream person last year. It happened in my whole career. I was waiting for this person to come in. I thought it was going to happen once when I was a sommelier at Maria. It didn't. It was another president and first lady. And then finally, 14 years into my sommelier career, I was like, I need to serve wine to Michelle Obama. And finally, she came into COTE with Barack for their anniversary. So amazing. And I cannot tell you how nervous I was. I mean, I was like, this doesn't actually happen. Your dream doesn't really come true. And she was so lovely, and Barack was so amazing. And I served her a glass of Favia, Cabernet Franc from California, female producer. And my hands were shaking the whole time. And at the end, me and Simon and Wesley were like, can we take a picture? And so we get a picture with Barack, and Michelle's just sitting at the table. And I was like, Michelle, I want a photo with you. I mean, come on. She's like, oh, yeah, I'll get the photo. So sweet. So I did serve my dream person.
Congratulations on manifesting that.
It's all downhill from here.
I doubt that. All right. Well, Victoria, thank you for coming by. I know how busy you are, and it's always delightful to talk to you. And thank you for being you and for everything you do.
And vice versa. Thank you so much.
That's it for today's show. Thank you to Victoria James for talking with me, and big thank you to Veuve Clicquot. If you missed our previous Power episodes with Kristen Kish of Top Chef or Katina Connaughton of Single Thread Restaurant and Farm, be sure to go back and give a listen. Our theme song is by the band Tra La La. Thank you to City Vox in Manhattan and Good Studio in Brooklyn. Our producers are Taka Zen, Catherine Baker, and Jenna Sadu, and our editorial coordinator is Sophie Kais. Thanks for listening, everybody. You're the bomb. And don't forget, use your power for good.